if you don't want to watch this whole video, the conclusion is they're pretty much the same, but if I needed to choose, I would choose the Exo-Terra. If you want to know why, then keep on watching. 6 months ago I set up this Zoomed Terrarium and I'm pretty happy with the result. 'All the monsters have been growing, the plants are doing well, you can see there are a lot of ferns, all the pepperoni is doing well. I'm misting it with reverse osmosis water, so that way I don't get too much staining. So it looks absolutely incredible. But it is time for new projects. This one needs to go, so it will disappear. So before it will be gone, I thought it might be a good time to do Zoomed versus Exo-Terra Terrarium match-up, face-off, whatever. In all seriousness, I've been using Exo-Terra terrariums for years, and I did a review on those terrariums last year for the channel. And then I thought, well, I also want to try the Zoomed setups, because in my opinion they look very similar, and I wondered if there would be any reason for a person to choose the Zoomed over the Exo-Terra or the other way around. So if you're interested in an in-depth review of these Exo-Terra terrariums, I will link that video over here. But if you wanna, if you're doubting between a Zoomed setup or Exo-Terra setup, then this is the video you want to watch. Now, Zoomed and Exo-Terra make terrariums that are pretty similar in my opinion. They all have the black plastic trimming also on the bottom, so it saves the glass from standing straight onto a table or a rack or whatever. They both have doors that open instead of sliding doors in the most regular terrariums. Only difference here is that the Zoomed has a single door and Exo-Terras all have two. Here you can see the Exo-Terra has two doors instead of one. Also the smaller Exo-Terra all have two doors, and the Zoomed has just one. And that was the reason I wanted to try out the Zoomed, because I wanted to have a very nice display setup. So that was more about the display, about the scape almost, and all the plants, than the animals itself. And that's why I chose to go for a Zoomed for this project, because there's nothing interrupting your view. So if you look into the setup and your glass is clean, you look straight in the setup, there's no line in here, and an Exo-Terra does have that. So that's one of the biggest differences between Zoomed and Exo-Terra. Two doors, one door. Now, and while we are looking at those doors, now both Zoomed and Exo-Terra have a locking mechanism. And as you can see with the Exo-Terra, if we open it, it opens like this. And you can close it down. Lock is still open, so you can still close it. And you also gotta keep in mind that when you close it, you don't close it before you close the window, because it is not locked this way. Still make it open. So the Exo-Terra has a lock like this. Now the Zoomed has a lock that you need to push down and pull open the window. And as you can see, it goes straight back up. And if you push the window closed, it's automatically closed. So I do like that. So as you can see, open, and I'm pushing it shut. There it goes, closed. So I do like that mechanism. And there's a small hole here, so you can put a lock in there if it's a display setup or you want prevent your kids or whatever to get in. You can also see that Zoomed as well as Exo-Terra have ventilation in the front, but Exo-Terra has kind of big holes with a small slit behind there, and Zoomed has all these small holes all across the front. So Zoomed does have a bit more ventilation in the front panel, and we all like ventilation, so that's good in my opinion. And I would never advise this because it's against your warranty, but you could take off the back side of the front panel, as you can see, because it's clipped in, and put mesh in there to prevent any fruit flies getting out. If you have seen my videos about Exo-Terra, you know that all the ventilation on top can be a big pro or a big con depending on your situation. I have everything in reptile rooms, so the temperature and the humidity in my rooms are about or around the parameters I needed to be in the setup. But if I would have these setups in my living room, a lot of humidity and a lot of heat would dissipate from the setup due to all the ventilation. So if a light will break, whatever, there's a big chance that it will cool down rapidly, or for some plants or for my mosses, they would die and dry out because it's not humid enough. So it can be a big pro and it can be a big con. A lot of ventilation is very good for the health of your animals, but it can also make it a lot harder for you to keep the humidity and the temperature gradient in your setup in the right parameter. So it's a bit of a difference, and Zoomed has the same problem. Because here you can see another Zoomed setup, and as you look at the top, it's all screen. Now again, a lot of ventilation can only benefit your animals. Fresh air, exchange of air, very important. But as mentioned, all that heat and all the humidity can dissipate from your setup. So you rather have these setups in a reptile room instead of your living room. Now I do like the way these tops are fitted a bit more as Exo-Terra. As you can see, it has the black trimming all the way around. There's no holes in there, it's all straight. Now if we look at the top, you can see that the mesh is actually stuck in between two plastic parts. And that's what I do like about Zoomed. Because the Exo-Terra has just the top, and then underneath a silicone piece pushes in the mesh. But the mesh of Exo-Terra is easier to exchange. And if you know Exo-Terra, at least the older ones, you do know that that mesh does need to be exchanged. Because the older series of Exo-Terra can discolor. As you can see here, this is an older type. It already has the new locking mechanism with the twisting caps. So this one already has the better locking mechanism, but you still can see discoloration of the mesh. Now of course you don't really want that, but it can be exchanged with the Exo-Terras. With the Zoomed, I have only 2 or 3 in use, so I can't say this for certain, but until now I did not have any problems with discoloration of the mesh on top. So that's great. So that's what I do like about Zoomed. Until now, no discoloration. Of course you also won't have that with the newer Exo-Terra. So if you get Exo-Terras after about 2018, 2019, I never had any problems with discoloration, but the older type, you can still have this mesh, turning brown. So overall, I do like the mesh top of Zoomed a bit better. It also has the slits in the back where you can push some cables through. Closes off a bit better, it's a bit tighter, and there's a plastic cap you can put in there to close off the rest. So that's also very nice. So it seems like I like these mesh tops a lot more, but what I dislike is that it's one big piece. So you can't really push anything on top of here, and of course if some part rips you need to exchange the whole top. Now here's a quick view of the Exo-Terra that I actually changed about. This was the first time I did it, so it doesn't look too great. But there you can see I actually exchanged the front panel with glass. So this way there's a bit less ventilation, but you can also see that in case in the front panel you have a tear, you only have to exchange this part and not the whole screen. And you can also see that black line walking in between, and that makes it a bit sturdy. So I do like that about the Exo-Terra. So in general I do like the mesh and the way it's fixed better. I do like the ventilation in the front a bit better. I do like the fact that there's just one door, so there's nothing interrupting your view into the setup. And I do like the way of the locking mechanism of the Zoomed a lot more. So why do I still choose the Exo-Terra? If you have seen my review video about the Exo-Terra, then one of the biggest cons to me was their range of sizes. Exo-Terra has a smaller range of sizes, and most of their setups are made for smaller animals. Their bigger setup is 90 centimeters long, 45 centimeters wide and 90 centimeters high. So if you're looking for something that's already a bit bigger, like a bearded dragon or Eki monitor, you won't find it with Exo-Terra. And that's the reason I like Exo-Terra still more as Zoomed, because especially in Europe, the only Zoomed types you can get are this size, a bit smaller or a bit higher, but nothing wider. So their range of sizes, at least in Europe, is even smaller until now, until I'm making this video, than the Exo-Terra ones. I know there are some 90 centimeters Zoomed setups in the States, but those already have 2 doors. So the fact that I like this setup more than this setup disappears as soon as you go a bit bigger, which is logical because you can't have a door of like 90 centimeters. That would be just strange. But still, those advantages disappear as soon as you go to the bigger size, and those are not available, at least not until now, in Europe. So not only is the Zoomed setup also just 45 centimeters deep, like the Exo-Terra, which is not that wide, you know. That's the only reason I'm currently keeping my Exo-Terras, because these are small setups for my plants and to raise animals. But yeah, 45 centimeters is not that wide, it's not as deep, you don't have as much surface for your animals to live on. And the fact that Zoomed has this same surface and often smaller, because we can only find the higher types and not the broader types, that makes it a big downside to me. Another big downside to me to the Zoomed setups, that at least again in Europe, this setup costs a lot more than an Exo-Terra of the same size. And those minimal changes or minimal plus points to me are not worth it, at least if I'm building a whole room full. Of course, if you want one very nice display setup, I like this one more than the Exo-Terra of the same size, simply because of this one front panel and the way that it locks. It just looks a bit better, a bit smoother, but you do need to think about the fact that it will cost you a bit more and if it's worth it to you. Oh, and while we're talking price points and money, the Zoomed, you just get the Terrarium, and with Exo-Terra you get those standard backgrounds, but those are not that great anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But if you want a cheap background in your setup, then the Exo-Terra has already one, and with the Zoomed you need to add one yourself. But I would always advise you to throw away the Exo-Terra background and replace it for one that's better. Yeah. So this is my version of the Zoomed versus Exo-Terra. I like and dislike them pretty much on both fronts. There are some minute differences about the Zoomed I like more, but I simply decided to get rid of these because I already have these. I don't need 2 types of terrariums with the same ingredients, the same downsides and upsides. And then the Exo-Terra does come in a wider variety of sizes. If you were wondering what's the biggest difference between these two, I hope this video helped. Again, if you have something that's a bit bigger, like a bearded dragon, Eki monitor, whatever, that this type of terrarium is already too small for you, so I would look for something that's either custom made or build it yourself, you know, bigger setups. It can be used to raise them. If you have something like day geckos, felsumas, Gonatodes. For your leopard gecko you could go for the 90 centimeters Exo-Terra or Zoomed if you're in the States. Dart frogs, all that stuff you can keep in these. Yeah, but do with it as you please. Thanks so much for watching. Goodbye.